I'm a tantric embodiment mentor and intimacy coach. I'm also a yoga teacher. So I help people get into their bodies and drop out of the mind and really feel their body and allow themselves to feel pleasure and sexual energy, and also understand what the feeling of love feels like, because so many of us might actually have blockages or protection mechanisms from fully receiving love in our bodies. And so I kind of look at it at a nervous system level as well as a psychological level, and being able to observe the patterns that we may have picked up over time, and also the cultural patterning that we've picked up from society around what we should be ashamed of, or around guilt, or even holding on to fear. And I find that those core emotions are stored in the body. And so as we learn how to release those emotions, we actually discover more pleasure and more connection in ourselves and in our relationships. At its core, Tantra is about embracing all aspects of who we are, including our sexuality. And it's kind of a mental framework and understanding that every aspect of ourselves is meant to be embraced. So we don't want to push any part of ourselves away, but really learn how to embrace ourselves and embrace life more fully. Tantra really embraces the idea that our physical bodies and our emotional bodies are directly connected. And so, shying away from these parts of ourselves can actually be detrimental to our health.
I absolutely agree with that. I'm curious, in your time seeing clients, what would you say is one of the most interesting things you've learned about human sexuality from seeing people directly? Something that may not be taught in books that you can only hands on.
Yeah. What immediately comes up is how few of us are taught about the anus. And specifically men, I've found it really fascinating how much shame there is around men having a pleasure center in their anus, and a lot of men don't even know that. And so that's been interesting for me. Of course, I didn't have any idea of that when I was growing up or in college. And it's understandable because there's so much hatred and homophobia, and a lot of expectations on men that they shouldn't like that. But it's really interesting to me that we all, have an anus and we all can experience pleasure there. And I feel like there is, even in my own experience, there is so much trauma that's connected to the anus. And it actually is connected to our root chakra. So the root chakra is the first chakra in teachings of Tantra. And the root chakra connects us to our sense of safety. And it's literally you can imagine roots are growing down through your legs and connecting you to the earth and to the sense of stability. And so I find that a lot of us are living in survival mode and clenching our buttholes and not able to fully let go because we don't feel safe, or we're afraid of not having enough money, or not having enough in general, or losing someone. And so there is this kind of collective fear and clenching of the anus. And yeah, I was surprised that came out because I wasn't expecting to talk about that. But that's something that's been really interesting to just explore emotionally and physically.
What's interesting to me is that I have asked that exact question to many people, and that has been multiple people's response.
Really?
Not exactly like how you said it, but the fact that men especially have these ideas around that area and what it means if they like anything that has to do with it. And so they just won't go there, or whatever the case is, because of what their ideas about what it means. So yeah, multiple people have said that is something that was really interesting for them to learn.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I've mostly been working with men for the past 4 years, and I've been working with more women recently. But honestly, I feel like working with men has taught me so much about myself, and I'm super curious about like the psychology of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be a man, and how my embodiment of femininity, like what that can bring up in a man, like the insecurities or the hunger, or you know, just or the fantasies that arise. And so I feel like that's been my initiation of like really learning how to anchor into presence and just being myself and being in my own body and just radiating love and compassion has been really expansive, because I used to have so much fear around my beauty, honestly, and like how much attention I used to get from men. But also on the other side of it, I've always had this gift of like really expressing my truth and really surprising people. So yeah, that's been like my channel, has been with men, but I'm starting to work with more women and feel really excited to support women in getting in touch with their bodies and their own safety in their sexuality as well. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because, obviously at LiveJasmin, a lot of models are women. And I've interviewed tons of members. And so I was curious, like, who you see more of, because there is something from what I've learned from doing these interviews with people that is very healing for men, especially
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to women holding a safe place for them.
Mm.
It is so healing for them. One of the members, he suffered a severe heart attack years ago. And so one of the consequences of that is that or side effects is that now he has really bad panic attacks and anxiety. And he said there has not been one time that he didn't go into this one particular model's room who he has a really strong connection with, that it didn't ease the anxiety that he was in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if it's also been your experience that a lot of your clients just want to ultimately feel seen or heard or held.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really beautiful, and that resonates, yeah, deeply with me. I feel like there's an expectation on men that like they need to be strong and they need to not need anyone, or they need to always be the provider. And the truth is, like, we're all human and we all want to be seen and we all want to feel loved and held. And so I find that with my clients, yeah, it's just I create a heart-centered space for them to feel accepted and even see parts of themselves that they've never had the courage to look at. Um, and yeah, and then when men and anyone, when we feel safe and we feel seen, then we're able to expand and express ourselves more freely and share more love with our partner or partners, because we feel connected to ourselves and we feel like assured and safe.
Have you ever seen a client who was using some form of camming or sex tech or even sex work?
I've never had a client who's been in camming or sex work, but I've had a lot of friends, um, and peers in that space. And this is like, camming was actually what started me on this journey of healing my own sexuality. I think it was in 2020, at the end of 2020, I had a group of girlfriends and they did a show. I don't know if I can name it here.
I'll
Yeah,
cut it out.
okay, cool. It's called the Naked Bakers. And so they would bake naked or cook naked. And like every week they'd have a different recipe and people would tip them and like they'd like do a spatula spank or a fridge check, like bending over. So they invited me to join them. And that was the first time I was naked on the internet. And it was so fun. And people were like, who is this little teeny? And like, the name just came to me. It was like, I'm Teeny Yogini, because I'm like small and I'm a yogi. And so yeah, and all the girls had OnlyFans, and so I started doing that with my partner, and we were making content. And yeah, whatever the girls were doing was like really inspiring to me and fun and playful, like the way that they just made it kind of like a game show. So yeah.
Yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun and something
Yeah.
people, it's interesting because I honestly feel like I always say that the lure of like sexuality and fun and flirtiness gets people in the door to sites like Jasmine or other campsites, and but they stay for the joy and the connection. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Mm.
things like that. I think they're people that go to these sites are deeply seeking joy, ultimately,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
fun and pleasure, you know,
Yeah.
and something like you just described, I can see how someone would like look forward to that, you know.
Totally. Yeah, I so agree with that. That's been my intention. Like, I'm not camming right now, but I probably will start again at some point. And I love what you guys are doing. It's super inspiring and like really resonates with me. Um, but yeah, it was like amazing how people would message me and just feel so grateful for my heart and my brightness. And, you know, they're really there for genuine connection. And I think that's what all humans want at the end of the day, is just to feel that sense of connection and joy and play. Mm-hmm.
That's so true. Yeah,
Yeah.
that pleasure, you know, and joy, like you said, that lightness, because
Mm-hmm.
there's not a ton of places in current day-to-day life where we can go and know that that's what we're getting. Do you know what I mean? You know, if you have people around you that bring that, that is awesome. But a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people don't. And I think that those
Mm-hmm.
are the people that are seeking it wherever they can.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious when you did do OnlyFans or the cam show with your friends, like what was your experience of that? What were your thoughts?
Yeah. I feel like it felt very natural to me. I've always been like a performer. I love being in the spotlight. I love being silly and playful, and I love being naked. So yeah, it made a lot of sense to me. Whereas simultaneously, you know, my mom and my dad and family, and like there's just like a whole circle. I live in my hometown, so there is a whole circle of people that I felt kind of like ashamed around, you know. And so it was a process of kind of breaking free of those limitations. And I feel like that's something that my partner really supported me in, was just there was a lot of like processing and releasing shame around, like, wait, like this is so natural to me. And it's not that I'm like, you know, some people have perceptions that it's like I'm trying to get attention, or, you know, I don't have self-worth or something like that. And those are all just judgments. And um yeah, so I think for me it was a liberating experience, and also a healing process with my parents when they found out. Definitely was like scary for them.
How did they
um
find out?
so my friend found a video from OnlyFans of me and my partner somehow, and she emailed it to my mom, and my
What
mom
kind
found
of
out.
friend?
I know. It's like, you don't do that. Yeah, she's like, hey, I think you should know about this. And my poor mom was like devastated and had a real challenge. But we had a coach. Her name is Catherine Cooley, and she does like focused on nonviolent communication. So it's about like helping people communicate and see eye to eye. And so it was a beautiful moment, actually, because through that session, my mom was able to see how she was holding judgment towards me, which was actually keeping her separate from me and actually like harming our relationship. And so that was really powerful. And since then, my mom's like been opening up her sexuality and like, you know, releasing so much fear and judgment, and like actually freeing herself. She's like getting saucy again. So it's like kind of a miracle story. Yeah.
That's actually a really beautiful story. I think
Yeah.
that that is, after interviewing so many of the Jasmine models and seeing things from their perspective, I think that that is one of the sadder parts about the industry, is that people have a lot of, and that's actually part of why we started this interview series, was to just get people more educated on the truth of the matter of things. Like, we're talking about camming, we're not talking about anything illegal, but people will associate sometimes anything sexual with things that are not legal or bad or whatever the case is. And it's not that way. And in fact, like, you know, like you said, people just assume, oh, she must have low self-esteem or this and that. It's like, no, that some of the models I've interviewed from Jasmine, which a lot of them are millionaires from Jasmine, they are some of the most confident, like have their head on straight, inspiring women I've met. I mean, they're business women. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're smart, they're savvy, they're beautiful, they're young millionaires, like 24 years old, and you know what I mean? They're millionaires.
Yeah. That's amazing.
I think that because there's still so much fear, which I'm sure, you know, even knowing about Tantra and yoga and stuff like that, there's still so much fear around sexuality. So anything that has to do with it, people are usually initially shunning it because they're afraid of what it means. But by you getting over your fear and stepping in, ultimately it helped even your mom move forward. Like, I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah. Super powerful. Yeah. It's like just stepping over the bridge into the unknown. But yeah, it definitely brought us both healing.
And then you decided to kind of move into Tantra, which is very healing for other people. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've always felt really passionate about healing others and creating safe spaces for people to connect to themselves and their emotions. And so it just felt like a natural gateway for me. And it also is like a creative outlet too, because I rarely structure any of my sessions. Usually my sessions are 2 to 3 hours, and I just flow. And I do have like certain practices that I'll do with people, but like as they start to share their experiences and their feelings, like I'll just start working with their body. And I incorporate yoga and breath work and then circulating chemistry. And then we pause and breathe and anchor into the heart. And then more things come up. I find that like when we open up our energy centers, the more that the subconscious will come to the surface, or the things that are left hidden will come up. So that's kind of my process. Yeah.
Beautiful. Were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just tying it back to my healing journey with webcamming, and just I feel like how that initiated me into like having little shame about my expression. And then, you know, through that embodiment that I cultivated through webcamming, honestly, and through the work that I do with my friends, just when people step into my space, they were able to feel that, and that also gave them permission to go there too.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
healing shame around sexuality, and a part of, you know, our sexualities are innately part of us. It's not going anywhere. But a lot of people have some form of shame or guilt there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's, I believe it's very damaging.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that, you know, women like you are really brave when it's like you work on your healing, your own healing, and then that will trigger other people inevitably,
Yeah.
but it also inspires a lot of other people, you know?
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm definitely still in a process of coming out and like really revealing all that I am and the whole journey that I've been on. You know, like Instagram is like a certain thin layer, and then there's like deeper layers. But I do believe the more that we can have these kinds of conversations and share our authentic stories, it just empowers us, and then it also empowers others. And it might trigger some, like you said, and you know, we have to just be okay with that, and you know, love ourselves through that. And yeah, it does inspire others that are curious about expanding their expression. Mm-hmm.
What would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions about human sexuality that you see, that you've either
Oh.
experienced or you've seen in clients or you've seen in some other way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess like the idea that men need to be masculine all the time and need to be like dominating in order to turn their woman on, and then vice versa, like that women need to be submissive in order to turn their men on. Or I don't know. I mean, obviously, like the queer community is like breaking down all of those barriers and walls, which I really resonate with. And I don't really like go by any label, but I definitely see myself as fluid. And I think, yeah, something that stands out is just the expectations that men and women put on themselves based on their cultural programming of what it means to be a woman or what it means to be a man. And I think that especially in marriages, you know, if the relationship started off with like that initial spark, and usually the man is like wanting to claim the woman and the woman's like receptive and maybe underneath like wanting to be wanted and wanting to feel safe, and that man provides that for her, I don't necessarily feel like that is sustainable. um, for the long term. I think that it's natural for us to have ebbs and flows and need to receive nurturing as well as give. And so I think like a lot of couples and men that I work with who are married are experiencing like that kind of death of their sexual spark. And so I think what needs to happen, and especially long-term relationships, is it's kind of like an ego death, or just an allowance for your identity to transform, of who you think you should be in relationship to this person and who you think they are or who they should be in relationship to you. And really, I think the beauty about tantra and the beauty about our sexuality is it is about who we truly are, and there is a capacity to connect on a soul level, and connect to our primal body at the same time. And that doesn't always have to look the same way. I also think that, you know, there's a lot of talk around like porn being super harmful for people to watch, and it is detrimental to relationships, which I think is the case if you're relying on it. But I also think that like I'm accepting and embracing of watching porn as well as like an education tool and as like a curiosity space. And I think the challenge or the detrimental part is when we're like hiding it from our partner or not being real or transparent. But I think it can actually be very healing to share like, hey, I actually really liked this video that I found on the internet, and like, would you be open to talking about it with me, and like, how's that feel for you? And that's really edgy for a lot of people, but it can actually bring forth more intimacy if you're able to come back to love and acceptance and connection, which can actually bring you closer, and maybe you discover something about your partner that they were hiding as well.
Yeah, or afraid to say.
Yeah,
And
totally.
like you said, that having those conversations can bring forth more intimacy. I've seen firsthand through LiveJasmin how that's true when I interview a member and that member tells me they've been talking to the same model for 10 years. And I'm like, wow, like, what do you like so much about her? And they'll tell me, well, she doesn't judge my fantasies or my needs, or she just doesn't judge me. And so
Mm-hmm.
having that safe place of finding someone where you can share your fantasies or things you like that are conventional or not, and they're listening or experiencing them with you, it's deeply bonding, so
Mm-hmm.
much so that two people who have never met in real life will still be talking 18 years later.
Mm-hmm.
The
Wow.
longest model member duo I interviewed was 18 years. So,
Wow.
yeah,
Amazing.
never met
Wow.
in person. But what
Uh-huh.
you just described of being vulnerable in, sharing yourself, that is so bonding, I think, for people.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, it's so important. We kind of equate intimacy, the word intimacy, with sex, but it's so much more than that.
Yeah.
And when we can expand like the transparency and authenticity with ourselves and with each other, I find that that creates even more turn on. And like there's more safety there when you can access that place of acceptance. It's like really ignites passion and more expression.
If you could give one message to the world about human sexuality that you don't think the world is getting right now,
Mm.
what would it be?
It's a remembrance of our innocence. I feel like we forget that our sexuality is an innocent part of being human. And, you know, we are alive because our parents had sex and we have a body and we have genitals and we have these amazing pleasure organs that can not only bring us pleasure, but also help us create life. And so I think that logical notion can actually support us in being like, oh yeah, like, huh, like, why do I feel so bad around this? Or why do I feel so much shame around it? Because it is, I believe at its core, it is innocent. We're in a mammal body, and this is the body that we've been given. And I also feel that just acknowledging that there is a lot of trauma, unfortunately, around sexuality. And so as you dive into opening up your sexuality, I think that goes hand in hand with also feeling a lot of emotions and pain and trauma release that may have been stored there. But through the process of Tantra, which is about embracing and loving every aspect of ourself, as those emotions come up and out, they're meant to move. Emotions aren't forever. So, yeah, just remembering that it is a tender process of healing our sexuality and coming back to that innocence and that core nature. So, yeah, just being compassionate with yourself along that journey.
I love the word innocence.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so glad that you used it in the way that you did. Again, because a lot of people do have inherent shame around
Mm-hmm.
this part of themselves. And it's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
actually, it's an innate, innocent part of you, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Is there anything about your work, human sexuality, camming, anything that we didn't talk about, but you want to share?
Something I feel really passionate about is looking at the nervous system and yeah, and the vagus nerve that runs through the whole spine and up to the brain. And this is where our brains send messages to our bodies and our bodies send messages to our brain. And so I find that through breath, through diaphragmatic breathing, we can actually repattern the nervous system into safety. And so that's a big piece of my work, is how can we actually train the body to feel safety again? And we're not able to activate natural, authentic sexual energy unless we feel safe. Because if the body's in survival mode, it's not going to try to reproduce, or it's not going to feel pleasure, you know? And so, yeah, in my work, we really focus on balancing the nervous system and coming into a state of homeostasis so that we can then feel this natural flow of pleasure and aliveness and love in our bodies. And it's a felt experience. So it's not really something that you can just receive intellectually and then integrate it. It really is something that you feel and experience, which is a practice. So that's one piece of my work. And then other piece I want to share is that I've been building this website and business with a group of my friends, and we call ourselves a polypod. So we all practice tantra together. We all do this healing work together as a family, as an entity. And we've built a business called the Studio X, and we're sharing our lifestyle with others. It's called the polytantric lifestyle. So it is about, you know, exploring the different levels of intimacy with different people and different practitioners, and just allowing ourselves to feel safe in who we truly are. And it is a space to kind of remove ourselves from the cultural norms and remove ourselves from societal impositions and really discover who we truly are on the inside, and how we can support one another in feeling more free and more expressed and having more love in our life. So that's kind of like a long-term project that we've been working on. And if you all who are watching want to visit thestudiox.com, you can totally check us out.
Amazing. And where can people find you?
I have a profile on thestudiox.com/Alisa Marie. Or you can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is Alisa Marie Alchemy.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ty. Yeah, it was great to talk to you.